Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Great to have you with us. I'm John Hanna, the Randi and Charles Wax Senior Fellow here at JINSA. Today, we've got a terrific panel of three wonderful experts particularly on the question of Hezbollah, Israel's security challenges in the north, and the dangers and chances for a major escalation of the war now that we're 1 month in, almost exactly from October 7th and the events of that day. As everybody knows, escalation has been a major preoccupation of both the Israeli, but in particular the American government, and deterring escalation and the spread of the war to other fronts has been a significant priority for the United States and for Israel. And the United States has undertaken significant activities, particularly in terms of military deployments, but as well in terms of diplomatic messaging directly to the parties that any escalation, as President Biden said, if they're thinking about it, don't. There will be consequences to pay, not just in terms of having to deal with Israel, but presumably having to deal with the United States military as well. And one of the, if not the principal player, when people begin to think about the potential eruption of a major of the fighting in Gaza becoming a major regional war, that at least significant part of that decision-making will be happening in Beirut with Hezbollah and with its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who, as most of you know, is in control of probably the largest, most significant terrorist army in the world, certainly one of the largest non-state armies in the world, whose capabilities, particularly in terms of missiles and projectiles, including some quite advanced capabilities, anti-air, anti-ship, anti-tank, a ground force of some significant capabilities that's been battle tested in the Syrian theater on behalf of the Assad regime, that they have capabilities that dwarf, in fact, most state militaries around the world or in the region. So Hezbollah is a very significant actor, and that's who will have a lot of say in where this conflict goes over the coming weeks and months. And that's what we're going to focus on today. I think most of our audience is aware that just this past Friday, for the first time in almost a month of this war, we finally heard directly and publicly from Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, in a speech that lasted nearly an hour and a half. That was very much anticipated. What would he say in particular? What would he tell us about the prospects that Hezbollah might get into this war in even a much deeper way than it has to date? So for that discussion, we've got three terrific panelists. I'll introduce them briefly. First is Hanin Ghaddar, is the Friedmann Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, where she focuses on Hezbollah and Shiite politics throughout the Levant region more generally. Hanin is a native of Lebanon. For a number of years before coming to Washington, she was the managing editor of Lebanon's Now News website, and before that wrote frequently as a journalist for Lebanese newspapers. We also have Sarit Zehavi, who is a lieutenant colonel in Israel's reserve forces. She was active duty for 15 years, mostly within Israeli military intelligence. She is the founder and president of Alma, a nonprofit research and education center that specializes specifically in Israel's security challenges on its northern border. Sarit is speaking to groups and on webinars and writing about Hezbollah, Lebanon, Syria constantly. And importantly, she and Alma are, in fact, based in Israel's north. She and her family, I don't know what her current situation is, she'll tell us, but they are, in normal times, residents of the Western Galilee. And then finally, we have Orna Mizrahi, who is a senior researcher at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies, INSS. Prior to joining INSS in 2018, she was in the IDF, 26 years, rising, I believe, to Lieutenant Colonel status. She had 12 years serving on Israel's National Security Council within the Prime Minister's office. From 2015 to 2018, she led the NSC's strategic planning efforts on international policy as the Deputy National Security Advisor for Foreign Policy. Within the IDF, she worked both as an intelligence analyst within military intelligence, as well as a senior officer in the Strategic Planning Division. And since October 7th, she's written and spoken extensively on Hezbollah's calculus as this war progresses, and of course, the threat of a major escalation in the north. What I want to do is start probably with each of you. I'll start with you first, Hanin, and just ask you, Nasrallah's speech from Friday. We were all waiting. I know there have been different interpretations, some people suggesting his basic bottom line message was, Hamas, you're on your own. I thought it was a slightly more nuanced and complicated speech from that, but I'd be very interested to hear from all of you on just what are the headlines? What are the bullets that you take away from the speech? Focus on anything you want, but please also on this question of escalation and what hints he gave us about where we may be headed. Hanin, please.
Hey, thank you, John. And I'm very glad to be here speaking to all of you, especially with this amazing co-panelists where this is going to be amazing. Well, I think, yes, he told Hamas, you are on your own. I think the speech that happened, like the main title of it is that I don't know what to do. This is his main, what Hassan Nasrallah was saying. He wants to be part of the war, but he doesn't want to be part of the war. So he's telling everyone that I'm going to continue these skirmishes along the border. I am going to always be part of this war, but I will not be involved beyond these skirmishes. And if you look at all the cross-border attacks that are happening, every rocket that goes beyond certain 1 mile beyond the border, deep into Israel, always Hamas claims it, or Qata'ib al-Qassam, or like the other, even the Muslim Brotherhood, the Lebanese Muslim Brotherhood military arm suddenly is part of Hezbollah's apparatus now. Hezbollah never claimed any rocket that went deeper into Israel. He is still targeting certain military communications, radars, cameras, fences, etc. This is his everything beyond that is plausible deniability. So plausible deniability is the game. This is the rule of the game. Although it's very risky because now everybody knows that no rocket launched from South Lebanon happens without Hezbollah's okay or even triggering. So plausible deniability is not he cannot maintain this game for a very long time. But I think what Hezbollah did was a major miscalculation. Their decision is not their decision. We all know that this kind of decision, which is a big war with Israel that involves America and Iran, is not a Hezbollah decision. This is a decision made in Tehran. And Hassan Nasrallah today was waiting for Tehran's decision on whether to escalate or not, right? Escalation can be this, it can be a little bit more, and it can be full-scale war. There are many different levels of escalation. It's not black and white. It's not yet nothing or everything at once. So he was waiting for Iran to tell him what kind of escalation he needs to do. And Iran, honestly, I think they miscalculated one major factor in this war, which is the US response. They did not really imagine that the US Biden administration per se is going to go back to the Middle East this way with all this kind of military deployment. And two, they did not really think that the Biden administration would come to support the Netanyahu government. But that didn't really play the way, although the Biden administration is not supporting the Netanyahu government per se, it's supporting Israel. But there was a big miscalculation. You can tell from the lower level of reactions to Hassan Nasrallah's speech and before and after with all the teasers and the trailers that he gave. I think he wants to do something big. He wants to be part of the game because this is what Hassan Nasrallah is good at, to be part of the resistance. He's very bad at everything else. He failed everything else, but he's very good at the resistance rhetoric. He really wanted to be part of this game, but he needed the Iranian approval. That's why all the trailers gave the impression that he was going to say something important because he was waiting. And then the Iranians said no because they realized that the Biden administration is serious about the don't. So his speech came out to be the most disappointing speech since 2006. It reflected an isolation, complete isolation of Hamas. And I think Hamas now could be in a position where they might be forced or more inclined to compromise or negotiate because they cannot really rely on the Iranians anymore. And two, I think what he said is confirmed the new mission for Hezbollah that is no longer resistance. He himself killed the resistance rhetoric on Friday. When he says, I am no longer part of the Free Palestine campaign, I'm no longer of the Free Jerusalem war that is happening now, because this is what his supporters think. He is telling everybody that I'm no longer the resistance. And this is the core of his existence. What is Hezbollah? Hezbollah is the resistance, the Shia ideology and identity, and his arms and money. Today, he's saying that I am here since 2006. Hezbollah's mission has shifted drastically from being part of the war with Israel and liberation, or whatever you want to call it. This is what they believed, and this is what they're good at. And the last victory they could ever claim is actually 2006. But today, his job is different. Today, their job is to protect Iran and the Iranian interests in the region, while trying to maintain the resistance rhetoric, in the sense that's what's happening today along the border. Daily attacks. This is just an attempt to keep this vagueness of a final decision. It could escalate any minute, and Iranians might actually change their mind any minute, because now the Iranians think they can still translate all the gains that they have attained from this war. The Iranians think that they told the world that we are back at the table. You cannot go and talk to the Saudis and do this train of normalization with Israelis across the Arab world all the way to India, and you cannot just leave us behind. We're back at the table. We are ready. So they're trying to translate these gains. Once they feel that they are threatened, that their own existence and their regional interests are threatened, they will use the card again. But Hezbollah is the most valuable card. And once they use it, they will lose it. And I mean the precision missiles, guided missiles that they have. This is really the most important, valuable asset for Hezbollah, and they haven't used it now. Once they use these missiles, I think this is what it means that the Iranians have actually started to shift their strategy. I can talk more about the challenges that they're facing and why they have reached this decision, but I'll just want to answer your question now and then come back to it later.
Terrific. Thank you, Hanin. Sarit, I want to go to you. I thought Hanin, in some ways, I guess, if you're going to be optimistic in the thought that Nasrallah has now ended the in effect, the Hezbollah commitment to acting in a significant way militarily on behalf of Hamas is good news. Nasrallah, of course, in his speech, went through a whole list of things that people need to understand that Hezbollah is doing that have had real military significance. Just a few of the figures I have, he talked about 1/3 of Israel's army is now committed to protecting the northern border. Half of Israeli Navy are in Haifa. 1/4 of its air force is dedicated to the north. Half of Iron Dome batteries and air defense batteries are committed to the north. 1/3 of all Israel's logistics. Tens of thousands of people evacuated from their homes. All these communities empty except for IDF. He's claiming these are big victories that are helping Hamas, preventing Israel from committing its full force to winning in Gaza. What's your take on the speech, and where does it leave us?
You know, every analyst has his own bias. My bias is that I live 9 kilometers from the Israeli-Lebanese border. I don't experience peace here. I don't experience non-involvement of Hezbollah. I experience war. And in any other scenario that Hamas wouldn't be involved or the initiator of all this mess, this would have been war between Israel and Hezbollah, because we are now living in a situation that there is no routine up north. Children are not going to school. We need to stay next to our bomb shelters. 60,000 people, as Nasrallah said, he was not lying around that. He lied about different stuff, but not around that. 60,000 people were evacuated, and nobody knows when they will be able to go back to their homes, including a big town named Kiryat Shmona of 22,000 people. That's a lot of people in Israeli terms. Anti-tank missiles are being launched every day, but also rockets and mortars and UAVs and infiltration strike. And by the way, I am now checking an initial report that to the rocket launching of this evening, Hezbollah did claim responsibility. So I'm now checking it as we speak. I'll let you know.
Where were those rockets targeting?
They targeted the Upper Galilee, but I'm still checking whether the report is true or not. But the bottom line is that what Nasrallah actually said is that there is a new reality on the Israeli-Lebanese border, and he put the state of Israel in an unbearable situation that cannot last forever, because I don't know about the numbers and it doesn't matter. Bottom line is that there are a lot of reservists recruited now to defend me and to make sure that people living up north are not going to be massacred. Because as you said, there is a unit prepared and experienced of Hezbollah, Radwan brigades, that their plan is the same plan as Hamas, to massacre Israelis. And now that we understand what they can actually do, now that we've seen this in such a realistic way, it is clear that we are not going to go back to the situation as it was before October 7. And as you can see in the pictures behind me, that I took photos of Hezbollah on the border every day. This is not going to be back anymore. So here is my point to summarize all of that. If Nasrallah understands, and I believe he understands, that he is putting Israel in an unbearable situation, and one day we will have to deal with that. We will have to find a way to bring back home 60,000 people to live in security. We will have to find a way to make me 9 kilometers from the border live in security, not afraid that somebody will shoot me in my bed, okay? How are we going to do that? What is he actually doing? He's taking the risk of war. This is what he's doing, and maybe even trying to drag Israel into war and get more IDF efforts on the Israeli-Lebanese border. So I'm not sure that he or the Iranians are deterred. Maybe there is a master plan here that we don't know of, that is something that takes more time than what we imagined, that is something of dividing their power and capabilities in a different way on the timeline than what we imagined. And we don't understand the full plan. It's okay. We don't have all the information. But when I stand here, what I see is the situation that Nasrallah created, and it's Nasrallah that created that, not Israel, that Israel will not be able to leave it as it is. It is clear. It will have to be dealt at some point.
Terrific. That's very interesting. I do think both in the future security situation in Gaza, as well as the future security situation in the north, whether or not Hezbollah had started firing rockets or not, I think, as you say, Hamas, in essence, on October 7th, followed the Hezbollah playbook. This is what Hezbollah would have done if they had had a chance to do it. Maybe they're planning for it, certainly, probably. What is the Israeli public? How do you get tens of thousands of people both back into the Gaza envelope as well as up along that border in the north after 10/7 who can really feel secure again in their homes? What does Israel's strategy have to be on security going forward, not just in Gaza, but in the north? These are very, very big strategic questions with huge implications for the IDF and Israel in general and the economy and all of those questions. But I'm glad you put it on the table, as well as the question of, is it possible? Because he did lie in this speech. He obviously lied about several things. I would think, and certainly Hamas before October 7th was engaged in all kinds of disinformation operations about its intentions and what it might do. Is something else going on in the planning coordination cells with the IRGC and Hezbollah and PIJ and Hamas and the other resistance forces? I don't know. But Orna, let me come to you. Let me have your thoughts on this speech and what you think is going on in Nasrallah's head about this conflict and how to proceed.
It's interesting. Thank you, John. Thank you for having me. It's interesting how every one of us sees other things in the same speech. It was long. It was 1 hour and a half, something like that. But I look at the bottom line. And the bottom line was, and this is what my take from this speech, the bottom line was, all options are open. And this is, I think, the main issue. He tried to create a kind of strategic ambiguity, and this is what he created. And I think that it serves him, because when he's vague and doesn't say exactly what he's going to do, it keeps everyone in Israel on alert. And the situation that Sarit has just now exposed in the north continues. And I think it's going to continue as long as the war in Gaza will last. Because and we have a kind of war now in the north. I call it a very low intensity military conflict, but it can of course develop. We saw some levels of escalation. We had, I think, since tomorrow is going to be 1 month since the Hezbollah initiated the first shot from the Lebanese border. I think we saw two steps, two levels of escalation. One was with the entrance of the ground maneuver of the IDF to Gaza, and the second was around the speech. And we think, I think, as I see it now, that we can witness more escalation in the future. Although, and in this point, I differ from Sarit. I think that both Hezbollah and Tehran didn't want to get into a wide-scale war. These days is very dangerous to say it, especially here in Israel, because we are in a time of breaking and the collapse of all the conceptions that we had in the past. And this is one of the conceptions that we had, that Hezbollah and Tehran doesn't want a war. And this is why we are more cautious about what can develop in the future. As I see it, is going to keep the border live and hot along all the campaign in Gaza. And the IDF has to be ready to every development in this case. He said in the speech that he will decide what to do and how to do according to developments in the Gaza campaign and in the Lebanese border. So I think he's a liar, and he lied about the issue of Israelis' responsibility of killing people on the 7th of October. Of course, it's the big lie. And he lied about his success along the border, because I think Hezbollah is quite disappointed and even frustrated from their, they don't succeed in what they are doing. They choose a mode of operandi that what they are doing in the last months, and it doesn't succeed, because they have 63, according to what they say, 63 activists that
martyrs,
and martyrs, shaheeds, and also others from the Palestinian and the civilians also. So they have a lot of casualties, and I suppose that every funeral of one of them and most of them are from the south. I looked at the list. Most of them are from the south of Lebanon. I suppose that people in Lebanon doesn't like it, and Hezbollah is very much aware about that. And another issue, and this is to raise the discussion, to motivate the discussion, is that I think it's right that the decisions are taken in Tehran, but I think that it's not like an order to Hezbollah. And according to what we understand of the relationship between Tehran and Hezbollah, it's more cooperation, understanding, building together the strategy than orders that are taken in Tehran and Hezbollah is obeying. Because I think that Hezbollah's considerations are more not complicated, but he has a wide range of considerations, and not just what the Iranians are wanting to do. I think that he keeps in his mind what's going on in Lebanon. It's very important, its status, its organization, its supporters, its status in Lebanon, what's going on in Lebanon, the crisis in Lebanon, etc. I think that it takes in account, and he is well aware of to the capabilities of the IDF and what the IDF can do. And he had some examples in the last few weeks when he tries to launch these accurate anti-tank missiles, and we find the activists and kill each one of them, and things like that. So, and the last thing is, of course, the very important consideration is the fact that the Americans are standing beside Israel so firmly and entirely, supporting what we are doing and threatening Hezbollah. So I think there is no interest. Maybe what it will look like, I'm trying to avoid saying the exact and be ambiguous also, but I think that at the same time they don't want war, but we can get there. And the possibility of having war in the north still exists, because it can escalate. Every day we have, I said, we had two main levels of escalation, and in the last few days after the speech, there is another escalation. We have this launching of rockets. Yesterday, it was to 30 kilometers deep in Israel, more than before. Before it was just along the border. So it can escalate, and a lot depends on what will the Israeli side decide to do with it. But let me speak about it maybe later.
Okay, thank you, Orna, very, very much. Hanin, let me go back to you and just again get you to opine on something regarding Iran. As we've said, I didn't know or I didn't realize before that he's capable of these kinds of sort of bald-faced lies. I thought usually, okay, there's a Hezbollah spin, but Nasrallah will tell you a lot about what is really happening from his perspective. But as Orna said, this lie about all the civilian deaths in Israel on October the 7th were essentially the result of the IDF gone crazy and panicking or whatever. But it was Israel responsible. That was so outrageous. The other, of course, thing he tried to get away with, and I'd like your view on it, and it goes to the larger influence relationship with Iran and how to draw the arrows. And but saying that this was completely a Hamas operation. We had no knowledge of it, nothing to do with it. Neither did the Iranians. And this is all Hamas, and good on them for doing this. But how do you understand? How should we understand the influence relationship between Iran and Hezbollah, and then Hezbollah and the wider resistance? Because he also spent quite a bit of time praising the Iraqi militias for attacking the Americans, praising the Houthis for the missile firings at Israel. Some people have opined that after Qasem Soleimani's death, that the IRGC has had a hard time replacing him, and that, in fact, the operational responsibilities and authority of Hezbollah became greater in the Iranian axis. Can you just talk a little bit about those influence relationships and how they work?
Sure. First, just to respond on the lies part, I think this is not the first time Hezbollah lied. He lied to the Lebanese people. He lies to the Lebanese people continuously. Maybe this is the first time he lies about something outside Lebanon. He lied about Syria most of the time. I think he lies, this comes from the taqiyya thing, right? He lies when it suits his narrative. And this time, admitting actually that Hamas, their partners, their brothers, have killed innocent people, it's a bit too much for the Lebanese and the Arabs in general. This is a message to the public opinion in the region, to tell them that, because if you think about it, Hezbollah itself tries to avoid, killing civilians during this war, right? It's always been targeting military points, etc. And they know that a big part of the public opinion in the region differentiates between the military targets and civilian targets. So this is his way of trying to spin the needle of the public opinion more to be more apologetic to Hamas, because still the fact that Hamas came in and killed 1,400 people and kidnapped 240 people, children, old women. This is something that they still aren't able to completely get over. He needed to say that. That being said, he wasn't convincing. The videos were out there. More videos should be out there. And I really think, despite the whole sensitivity of the families, etc., this is a big deal for them. It shifts public opinion when people see the atrocities of Hamas that were seen the first week. This public opinion that is shifting now more anti-Israel and more pro-Hamas in the world, you can bring back the needle when you show what Hamas has done. And this is Nasrallah's attempt to keep the public opinion there. So that's why he lied. On the Iran-Hezbollah-Hamas dynamic, it is true that it's more of a conversation. It's not like he's not like a little soldier, and he is definitely a great advisor on Lebanon. He can make decisions when it comes to Lebanese domestic politics. They leave that arena to him because he knows better. It's true that they are part of the discussion. However, I have to say that the IRGC is a structure. It's an institution. It's not like a Lebanese party where there's like one man show or like two people show. It's an institution, and there's a hierarchy, and people like Nasrallah are very much trusted. But at the end of the day, they do take his opinion very, very seriously. But at the end of the day, it's not the person who makes the decision. It is the decision is about Iran's interests. That's how they function. At the end of the day, Iran interests come first. Hezbollah's Lebanese consideration comes second in this kind of decision. It's very important to understand this. At the end of the day, the institution functions to protect Iran's interests, and the proxies are something else. And that being said, the difference between Hezbollah and other militias in the region, including Hamas, Hezbollah is part of the IRGC. It's an intrinsic, organic part of the IRGC. The others are proxies. That's the difference. Hezbollah is not a proxy of the Iranians. It is part of the institution. The others are actually the proxies. So Hamas is a proxy. And what happened, I think, on the whole October 7, because of all the miscalculations, what they thought, I really doubt, although we don't have like direct evidence, but we have so much circumstantial evidence saying that they knew. And if you think about what happened in April, since April 2023, earlier this year, when Haniya and others met in Beirut with Hassan Nasrallah and the IRGC guys to start this joint operation room. After they issued the joint operation room, established the joint operation room, they actually started talking about the United Front. And then since that month, since April, all the escalation along the Lebanese-Israeli border started, and I think to distract attention from what was going to happen in Gaza. It is coordinated. I can't see it otherwise. Of course, we don't have evidence. You have to be in that room in order to have evidence. But since then, they've been meeting and talking every day and coordinating attacks from Hamas and Hezbollah from Lebanon. And I cannot believe really that the Hezbollah and the Iranians were surprised. You know, this is another lie. Hamas is a proxy. Hezbollah is the most valuable card for the Iranians. So basically, this is it. For Iran, they are not going to sacrifice Hezbollah, their most valuable asset, for Hamas. Hezbollah is not going to sacrifice their most valuable asset, the precision missile, guided missiles, for Hamas. Hamas is a proxy that can be used and sacrificed when other things are more important. This is how it's working. And today, this is the case. This might change when their calculations change, but not to save Hamas, to save Iran, to save Hezbollah. Their battle will come. Their battle will definitely come. They're not building all this arsenal of precision missiles, and the Radwan forces, like Sarit said, are ready to do this. But they know that they have to be ready for this war, the big war, right? Readiness requires a war budget, which they don't really have right now. Readiness means that they need a military commander who can declare victory. The last time they were able to declare victory was in 2006 with the military commander. Their military commander was Imad Maghni. Imad Maghni was the last actually military leader to actually convince a victory. Since then, Imad Maghni died, and that's back to the last question. Mustafa Badruddin was killed by Soleimani himself. Soleimani was killed by the Americans. And then what they have is second-rate, junior, Shukur and others. They're good, but they're good at like leading a battle in Syria or leading small skirmishes along the border, but they're not good in leading such a war with Israel. No one can replace Imad Maghni. No one can replace Soleimani. And that's one of their most important military challenges. 3, their fighting force. You can tell it's a lot of people who died on the border since October. In 1 month, more than 60 young people. If you look at them, I studied all the pictures, and I go into like details of the analysis of the pictures of these head and their backgrounds, and who are they, and like we know people who know them. These are not the standard Hezbollah fighters. They're not very well trained. Some of them were trained in Syria, some of them were not. They're not ideological in that sense, they're committed and trained, and they're not ready to fight Israel. This is basically, especially with the Americans, backing Israel up. So they're united. They have a lot of numbers. Their fighting force is quantity but not quality. Their army that fought the 2006 war is not there yet. They're working on it. I'm not saying that they're not going to be ready to get there. They are getting ready to get there, getting their fighting force more trained and ready, getting one of their military commanders that are now like the junior ones to be more ready to lead such a war, having a budget for the war, all that they will get ready. And I think at one point, even if now today they're not ready to go to a full-scale war, they're going to let's say scale war, they are getting ready for that. And I believe that this whole deterrence strategy between Hezbollah and Israel on the Lebanese border is over. And this is something the Israelis can talk about more, but I feel that after all this, all eyes will be turned on Hezbollah, because they know that once they're ready, they're going to do this again. And October 7th is going to be repeated on a bigger scale from the Lebanese border. And this is what they're readying for. And today they're saying we're not going full scale. Iran is saying we're full scale because this the most valuable asset that they have, they will use it when they go big scale, but this is not the time.
Great. Sarit, can you just comment on that? Because if in fact it is the case that outside of some kind of miscalculation, which can easily happen with these border skirmishes beginning to intensify and expand, but outside of that Iran has made a decision that Israel is going to be left alone, potentially to eliminate its Hamas asset, and Hezbollah and Iran are simply going to mess around at the margins, but we don't have to fear Iran unleashing Hezbollah to in any way, shape, or form save Hamas in Gaza. That is a bluff. It is because Nasrallah made a big deal out of the fact that they're sowing panic and fear within the United States and Israel about the potential for escalation. They're so worried about us. But is this in fact a bluff? Is there no way Iran is going to unleash Hezbollah to save Hamas? They're prepared to lose their Sunni Arab Islamist asset in Gaza if that's what's going to happen here.
Well, I see things a little bit differently. First thing I would say again, I don't connect to the word skirmishes. These are attacks that don't enable us to live regular lives. And Hezbollah knows that eventually we will have to live regular lives. We'll have to figure it out. And I think this is why it is doing that. If I'm looking backward to the past year and a half, when I started to see this Hezbollah on the border, I see it building its positions on the border, spying on us from the borderline. And I look at the attacks that were carried out, again, not provocations, before the provocations, attacks that were carried out in the past year, like rockets that were launched last Passover, tens of them in the Western Galilee where I live, and anti-tank missiles in Rajah, and infiltration in March. All of that is trying to drag Israel into an escalation, into war. This is what I think. When we look at the UNIFIL reports, we see that between February to June this year, there were 600 crossings of the border from Lebanon to Israel. Now, it's not refugees, it's not workers, it's not immigration, it's not something like that. It's just coming and going, touching the fence and going back to see how IDF will react, to see how quickly we will arrest the person, to check where are our weaknesses and where are we strong. This is preparations for invasion. When I am looking at the targets that Hezbollah chose since day one, since October 8th, along the borderline, if I compare it to previous operations in Gaza, the uninvolvement was framed to few rockets here and few rockets there, using the proxies of Hezbollah, which are Palestinian factions in Lebanon. But what I see now is picking the targets very carefully to damage the Israeli preparedness on the border, like a Cornet, which is an anti-tank advanced missile that is launched to an antenna, and we see the videos that are coming out of Hezbollah, is hitting the specific capability on the antenna. And if you see shooting at cameras on the borderline, on the wall itself, you understand what does that mean for us. And if you see anti-tanks that are launched against the soldiers on the border, you understand what the security meaning of that. This is preparing for invasion. And again, reminding everybody, this is exactly what Hamas had done on the Gazian border. So I personally believe that Hezbollah is doing all the preparation it can to an invasion. I believe that in the past year, it accelerated the preparations for an invasion. And Hanin mentioned the meetings, which I think these meetings were highly important in setting up the plan, the master plan that I mentioned, to set up the joint operation room. They published it. They published how it looks like. And even if it was a symbolic joint operation room or the real joint operation room, it doesn't truly matter, because the idea was to create a multi-front campaign against the state of Israel. That's why you see Yemen, all of a sudden, the Houthis in Yemen involved. That's why you see the attacks against the United States in Syria and Iraq. This is not something which is just between Hamas and in Israel, like Nasrallah tried to frame it. I totally agree that Hezbollah, in building his image inside Lebanon, is not interested to present himself as the one who is fighting for the Palestinians or for Hamas, or I don't know. He wants to present himself as the one who is fighting for the Lebanese. And that's why, as I've said, what it is trying to do is to put the finger at Israel and make Israel initiate this major escalation. And that's a double win-win for him, because that way he will get the legitimacy of the Lebanese and he will get the legitimacy of the world, which is already damaged, as Hanin described. And for us, this is a huge problem, because again, we don't have life here. Everybody's saying that there is no war here. It's not quiet here. People need to understand Hezbollah initiated low-scale war against Israel, which he knew that we cannot tolerate. So what is this exactly? Now, as for the Iranians, you know, Hanin, I always say that, you know, with regard to what you said about the relationship, I always say that Hamas is the freelance and Hezbollah is the actual employee, senior staff member, like the CEO of the IRGC, while it has the president, which is Khani, okay, something of the sort. I am not sure that it's that important to have military commanders. I think that Nasrallah stepped in to become a military commander while Imad Murnia was killed. I agree that he doesn't have too much of a choice. We don't see figures as expected, with charismatic figures as we would expect, but I'm not sure this will prevent him from going to an invasion against us, because he succeeded in Syria. He did some stuff in Syria that can be on his record, okay? And again, when I look at the preparations here, I don't have any other explanation but being prepared for an invasion. And last thing I want to say about the U.S. Carrier and the U.S. Threats against Hezbollah. When Biden landed back in the United States and somebody asked him on the plane, and when he went back, somebody asked him, so if Hezbollah will get involved, is the United States going to get involved? And his answer was, I didn't say that. On the plane, this is what he said. I didn't say that. So for me, as an Israeli, all this assistance is extremely encouraging, extremely important, but it has nothing to do with deterrence. I want to forget the word deterrence after October 7th. I want to remember the word operational assistance. So it means that if something will deteriorate, the US carriers, submarines, I don't know, whatever was sent to this region is willing to actually participate in battles, because otherwise it is meaningless. It's not about psychology anymore. Psychology failed. And here, I don't think that 64 or 65 Hezbollah military operatives that were killed makes any difference for Nasrallah. Maybe for the mothers. Even with that, I saw them giving candies in Kfar Kile. I don't see this making any difference. It's not 600 like in the Second Lebanese War. It's 60. That's it. And maybe they are now using, because the numbers looks too low when we compare it to the amount of squads that were targeted. So many, it's not only Hezbollah. Maybe Hezbollah found different solutions here. I don't know, bringing somebody else to do the dirty job for him. The invaders will be Radwan, and we haven't seen them yet participating in large scale in what is happening here. This is clear. And again, I'm repeating this over and over again. Israelis in the north are not going to live with the threat of Radwan anymore. This is not happening. We are not going to enable that anymore. We are not going to be massacred like our brothers and sisters in the south. And Nasrallah understands that.
Right. Yeah. But of course, the implications of that statement are huge for Israel, for the United States, for the world. Orna, we're running out of time. I do want to, touch on this question of the U.S. role. Sarit doesn't like the word deterrence. The U.S. obviously engaged those Houthi missiles. They've had one response in Syria against the IRGC related facilities, although there have been more than 30 attacks and even attacks after that response. But Nasrallah spent a lot of time in his speech talking about the U.S. And the U.S., Khomeini was right. They're the great Satan. They're got to pay the price. They need to face the music here directly. If they don't stop this war, they're in big trouble. Talk about your view of the U.S. role and whether you think it's having an impact, and what more might the U.S. and Israel do to try and get at this operational cooperation that enhances the caution on the part of the Iranians and Hezbollah and their other proxies?
Okay, I have so much to say, but I'll do it shortly. Headlines. I think differently than Sarit about the American intentions. I think that the Americans are very much concerned about what's happening. It's not at the first day that it happened. They were there. They came here to say, we are here beside you, and we will do whatever needed to do. And I think that this time they are more serious than they were before, and not because of Israel, because it's their own interests. Because it's their own interest. It's in not having a war with Iran, in not having a global war that they will be involved in. And this is why, for example, Blinken was just yesterday in Iraq to tell them, please stop the attacking the American forces in Syria and Iraq, because it's going to deteriorate. So I think that the Americans are involved. We see it. I have some contact with the Israeli establishment, and I see how much they are involved in what's going on. And I think that they are more serious than before. And I hope we wouldn't get to the point that they have to do something. But I think that if the situation deteriorates, we can see in the future more help to Israel. We don't need them to fight for us, but they will help us both politically and militarily, by munitions and whatever we need, and maybe even if we want in defense activity. Defense activity for Israel, not offensive. This defense activities for Israel. I read between the lines of the Americans that that are talking that this is something that they think about. Now, another important thing to say is about what Sarit was talking about, the need to find some kind of a new, to create new reality along the Israeli border, along the Lebanese border, because we need this population that was evacuated for the communities in the north to go back and to feel secure. And to do that, we need to create a new reality. And in the Israeli establishment, they have started already to think about how we can change the reality and what is needed to do. I think, at least I think, we are not going back to the same equation, deterrence, and all this stuff that we were talking before. It was the rules of the game that Nasrallah tried to force us, that if we target one of his activists, he is going to target one of the Israeli soldiers and things like that. We are not going to go back there. We'll do whatever needed to push back the Radwan forces from the Lebanese border. it will be different than it was before. I hope at least, and at least there is start of thinking. They are starting to think about how to do it and what is needed to do, because the change is needed, and we cannot do without it.
Great, thank you. Hanin, I do want to ask you one question that was raised by one of our listeners, and that has to do with, okay, let's assume that you're right, that Hezbollah and Iran have made a decision. They're not going to commit to this major war if they don't have to, that if that means Hamas going down, that might be what it requires. They're going to protect themselves and protect the Iranians from the coming battle with Israel or the United States. Is there an information operations opportunity to hurt Hezbollah and the Iranians and their resistance credentials as a result of this? Or is it just a bunch of noise that nobody's going to really pay attention to in the Arab street? Quickly, if you can.
Yes, very quickly. We don't know what's going to happen next, right? For now, Iran and Hezbollah have basically stuck to certain rules of engagement, right? Whether it's a war in the north, skirmishes, you can call it whatever you want, but there's some kind of limit, and they stuck to that. But that's for now. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know if Hamas loses. I don't know what that even means, because their attitude is really about, if we still have like one soldier fighting, that's a victory, right? So who knows how they can spin it any way they want to avoid actually sacrificing their assets for Hamas. This is the main question for them. Like, when is the moment when Hezbollah decides to sacrifice their assets for Hamas? So Hamas, I don't think, is the question. It's what Iran wants. And this is what I think the precision missiles were going to be used and the Radwan forces are going to be used. These two haven't been used until today. This might change tomorrow when they're ready. The op campaign, I don't think there's any focus on this, and this is a huge mistake. And I agree that there should be some kind of operation information campaign in order to discredit Hezbollah. And I think Hezbollah is today worried about the public opinion. That's why he talked a lot about, like the what the Hamas have done or they haven't done, and lied about all that. But he's worried. He's worried. They're worried. The Iranians are worried about the public opinion. And this is a battle that they have been focused on. They are not good on the ground as much as they are on the information campaigns and the public opinion battles. They're good at that, and they're focused on that, and they're winning that. And this is why I think, the needle needs to be, that public opinion battle needs to be addressed through information campaigns, through, like more videos of what really happened, a lot more than this. Like today, the battle is really focused on the ground, and everybody's waiting for Hezbollah to do something, and that something needs to be addressed here. I totally agree.
Great. And then Sarit, just one last question for you that came up in the Q&A here, and particularly in a post-Soleimani world, there was a question of why Nasrallah is still alive, and should he be a legitimate target, particularly in a post-10/7 world, as we think about that the situation as it existed beforehand is no longer tolerable? Or is that still considered just way too risky, and you don't do it until you're really ready for the big battle? Because in that case, Hezbollah would be all in with their precision-guided missiles and everything else.
Completely. I think that the IDF and the Israeli government prioritized Gaza before the North. This is the right thing to do now at this timing. Afterwards, we'll see what we can do, what could be done with the North. And it is clear that we'll have to deal with the PGMs. I'm not sure they are less of a risk to Israel than Nasrallah.
Okay, terrific. Sarit, thank you for that. Well, unfortunately, we've got to end it there. An hour was much too short with all this expertise, but we got a little bit of taste of how deep the thinking is. Some of the areas of disagreement we're going to be watching closely, but I think I get from all of you that we're all eyes are going to be focused mostly on Gaza. Certainly the IDF, that's where their main line of operations is, but at some point in time, in the not too distant future, Israel, the United States, and all friendly governments are going to have to think and turn their attention to the north as well. So that's we'll all continue to think and plan and discuss that subject, but we've got to keep it in mind even as we deal with Gaza. So with that, let me really thank all of you. This has been such an honor and a pleasure to have you all on. You're amazing experts, and you bring so much to the table. So we appreciate it. We hope we'll be able to call on you in the future. But for now, thank you, and thanks to our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for having us, and good to see you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure.